My name is Margaret Elizabeth Walker, and I am 69 years old. I have white hair that I usually wear in a simple bun, and hands marked by time and the decades I have dedicated to my family. I am the type of person who still folds napkins before putting them away, and who still sends handwritten Christmas cards. I was born and lived most of my life on the shores of this same lake, where my husband Cliff and I built not only a house, but memories. And it was here, in this very place, that everything fell apart. The day seemed perfect. Clear skies, the smell of meat grilling, laughter scattered across the lawn. It was just another one of our summer barbecues, the ones I had organized religiously for years. But that Sunday was different, not because of the weather or the food, but because of the people. Or rather, because of the way they looked at me, or didn't look at me. My grandson Kyle was 19, tall, with an easy smile, but with eyes that had long since lost their tender sparkle. He was there with a group of friends making fun of everything, including me. And then, between jokes, he turned to me with that half smile that never reassured me. "Come on, Grandma. Let's see if you can still swim like you used to." I laughed, thinking it was just another one of his bad jokes. But before I could react, I felt his cold hands on my back. A push. Hard. Cold. And I fell. My body twisted in the air, and I screamed. But the sound sank with me. I hit the water like a rock. The shock knocked the wind out of me. My muscles froze. I tried to scream again, but only swallowed more water. I hadn't swum in over 30 years. After shoulder surgery, the doctors were clear. No risks, no cold water, no straining my arms. I obeyed, till that moment. I struggled, I writhed, the pain and fear blinding me. When I managed to surface, coughing and spitting up water, all I saw were faces, impassive, some laughing. Kyle, with his arms crossed, was laughing out loud. Daniel, my son, standing next to the barbecue, just watched. Paula, my daughter-in-law, swirled a glass of wine and muttered, "She's being dramatic." I don't remember how I got out of the water. Instinct, perhaps. Fear. A reserve of strength I didn't know I still had. I crawled to the deck, my knees scraping the wood, my heart pounding. And absolutely no one moved to help me. Kyle approached and looked down at me, the cruel smile still on his face. "I guess you still know how to swim. Tough girl, huh?" They laughed as if I were the final act of a cheap show. That laughter stayed with me. It echoed like a haunting in the days that followed. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I got up, soaked, humiliated, with my dignity hanging off my body like my wet clothes. And in that moment, I remembered something Dolores, my best friend of over 30 years, had said the week before. People show you who they really are when they think you have nothing left to offer. I returned alone to the picnic table. My knees still hurt and water dripped down to my shoes. No one came after me. They went back to their hamburgers and opened another bottle of wine, as if nothing had happened, as if I hadn't almost died for pure entertainment. And it was there, soaked, invisible, betrayed, that I knew. That white-haired woman, forgotten at the bottom of the lawn, still had choices. And they had forgotten one important thing. Kyle's college fund, the one I had kept since he was 10, was in my name. And I wasn't dead yet. When you reach 69, you carry many versions of yourself. The young girl who danced to the radio in the kitchen, the mother who squinted to read toy instructions, the wife who held her husband's hand in the hospital, and most of all, the grandmother who saw hope in the smile of a boy with round cheeks and scraped knees. Kyle. He came into my life like a sweet storm. The son of Daniel, my only child, and Paula, a woman who always seemed more concerned with looking perfect than being kind. Kyle was my little savior. When Daniel and Paula faced difficulties, unstable jobs, constant fights, I was the one who took care of the boy. I was the one who packed his lunchboxes, took him to the pediatrician, and rocked him to sleep with stories about dragons and constellations. I called him my little piece of heaven. And for years, he seemed to be just that. I remember like it was yesterday the Christmas when he got an old keyboard I bought from a retiring music teacher. It cost half my savings, but his smile when he played each key for the first time? It was as if I had placed the entire universe under that boy's fingers. "This is better than Christmas, Grandma." With his messy hair and bright eyes, Kyle was all emotion. Sensitive, affectionate, He followed me around the house, helped me pick hydrangeas, asked me questions about the sky. But when he entered adolescence, he began to change. First, the little things. A grunt instead of a thank you. Then impatient looks when I asked for help climbing the stairs. I thought it was a phase. Teenagers, hormones. He still loves you, Margaret, I would tell myself, staring into the mirror. He's just growing up. But growing up wasn't the problem. It was what he was learning as he grew up. Daniel and Paula were always absent. When they were present, they were critical. They laughed at my habits, my 5 o'clock tea, my tissue collection, my taste in old soap operas. Kyle absorbed it all, like a sponge. The looks, the impatient sighs, the muffled laughter when I forgot something or was slow to get a joke. I still remember the first time Kyle mocked me. It was a comment about how I stirred my tea with a spoon. A silly detail, but said with that subtle venom that only those who learn to despise make a point of distilling. I laughed, uncomfortable. But inside, I felt a twinge. The same one you feel when you realize that something precious has begun to crack. I should have said something. I should have pulled Daniel and Paula aside and demanded respect. But I was afraid of losing the last spark of that boy who once called me his favorite person in the world. So I kept quiet. And by keeping quiet, I diminished myself. I became what they expected me to be. Useful, discreet, invisible. I continued throwing parties, buying gifts, offering my time, my home, my heart. Kyle's college fund? I started saving when he was 10. Every bonus, every refund, every coin left in my purse. Not for me, for him. Because I believed. Because at that time he still hugged me tight and whispered that I was the best part of that house. And maybe I was. But that didn't save me from being forgotten. The Kyle of today doesn't smile like that anymore. He doesn't kiss me on the cheek when he comes home. He doesn't ask how I am or compliment my cooking. He sits on the couch, buried in his phone, complaining about the Wi-Fi connection. The last time I tried to talk to him about his college major, he replied, "Grandma, I have more important things to think about, okay?" As if I were just noise. An echo of a generation he had already discarded. But even in the face of indifference, I continued to love him. Still, I made his bed with care, left cut fruit for breakfast, and checked to see if he got home safely from parties. Maybe because deep down, I hoped that the boy from before was still there, hidden, waiting to be rescued. But that day at the lake, that cold push, that cruel laugh, that empty look, I knew. He was no longer there. That night, after everyone had left and the house fell into familiar silence, I sat in the bathroom with the towel I always kept for guests, old, rough, but clean. I dried my soaked body as if removing not only water, but layers of pain. My clothes were stuck to me, my knees were scratched, my white hair was disheveled. I looked at my reflection in the mirror, a 69-year-old woman with fair skin and a soul more scarred than her face. I looked like a ghost, but I saw myself more clearly than I had ever allowed myself to see before. Outside, I heard muffled laughter. Paula was describing resorts in Mexico while Kyle spilled soda on my freshly polished kitchen floor. Daniel was sprawled on the couch, laughing quietly, a dirty plate balanced on his knee. Not a question, not a blanket, not a glance. I sat down at the end of the kitchen table. No one saw me. No one noticed me. No one even mentioned what had happened. It was as if I didn't exist. Their silence pierced me more than the cold that still clung to my back. That's when Dolores's words came back to me. People show you who they really are when they think you need them. At that moment, something inside me changed. It wasn't anger. Not yet. It was a strange clarity. Cold. Clear as the reflection of the lake the next morning. I got up, wet, bruised, and ridiculously alone, but whole. For the first time in a long time, I felt like myself. I went to my room. The same bed where I used to read stories to Kyle. The same quilt I embroidered with the initials of my late husband, Cliff. The same bookcase with photo albums I used to flip through to remind myself that my life had been worth living. I sat down and wrote, my hands still shaking. They'll never have the chance to drown me again. And that wasn't a metaphor. It was a vow. The next morning, I called Dolores, my soulmate, one of those friends who walks in through the side door without knocking, carrying bags of bread and secrets. When she answered, her voice was unwavering. It happened, didn't it? I didn't need to say it. She already knew. I'll come over with coffee and emotional ammunition, she said, ending the call before I could respond. 30 minutes later, Dolores was in my kitchen, wearing a turquoise jacket and oversized sunglasses, balancing a tray of muffins and 2 mugs of coffee as if she were about to invade a headquarters. Without ceremony, she looked me up and down. "You look terrible, Margaret." I nodded, forcing a smile. She poured the coffee and pulled something out of her bag. An envelope. She placed it in front of me. "My lawyer's card, Peter Holloway, and the list of bills you gave me last year when I helped you with your taxes. You kept this?" I asked, surprised. "Margaret, I keep everything, even my church bingo ticket from 2002. You think I'd miss a chance to save you from a family that throws you in a lake?" I was silent. It seemed final, cruel, cold. "I don't know," I muttered, clutching the mug between my hands. "It feels like if I do this, it's like I'm giving up on them." Dolores placed her hands on mine, staring into my teary eyes. "Giving up on them? My dear, they gave up on you the moment they found your desperation amusing. Outside, the flowers Cliff had planted years ago, purple lilies and hardy azaleas, bloomed, stubborn as ever. He used to say that flowers like these were like true love. They took a long time to sprout, but once they took root, no one could pull them out. I felt like one of those flowers, rigid, still standing, but no longer for them. "I don't want revenge," I said, my voice firmer than I expected. Dolores smiled crookedly, as only she could. "Of course not. You want peace, and that, my friend, is much more powerful." She stood up and took me by the hand. "Let's go to lunch in town. You'll eat something that didn't come out of a package, and then we'll call Peter." "I haven't been to that cafe in months," I confessed. "Then great. Let's show the world what strength looks like in white hair and a knitted sweater." In that car, with the windows down and the wind messing up my loose bun, I realized something simple and profound. I was still me, and maybe, just maybe, that was all I needed to start over. That after lunch with Dolores and the brief but firm conversation with Peter Holloway, I returned home a different person. On the outside, I was the same 69-year-old woman, white, with white hair carefully tied back in a low bun. On the inside, I was a woman who had awakened from a long, emotional winter. But it wasn't time to leave yet. Before I went, I needed to see. I needed to know. Who saw me as someone? Who saw me as just an obstacle between them and my will? Peter explained that nothing needed to be done immediately. Everything would remain as it was, but under observation. Kyle's college fund was still untouched. The house, the assets, the documents, all legally in my name, but in the process of being transferred. I wanted to know who deserved my presence. And if no one did, at least my absence would leave a hole that would be difficult to fill. I started slowly. A stumble in the living room. A forced pause when climbing the stairs. Sometimes I pretended to forget where the kettle was. I let the tea spill a little. And when someone asked me something, I made a visible effort to remember. Nothing dramatic. Just enough to seem fragile. And it worked. Not with compassion, but with impatience. Kyle started ignoring me completely. Not even a hi when he came in. Just heavy footsteps and eyes glued to his cell phone screen. "Grandma, is there any bread?" "In the fruit bowl, dear," I replied, even though I knew it wasn't there. Ugh, it's hard to get things done around here. Hard. Hard was holding the pain of betrayal deep inside and still smiling. Daniel, my son, started whispering to Paula in the kitchen. Quietly, but not quietly enough. I always heard. "I don't think she's taking her meds right," he said one night, washing dishes I had left clean. "She's getting worse," Paula whispered. "She left the oven on again yesterday. I didn't. I checked 3 times before going to bed. But I let them believe it. I let them build their own story about me. One where I was weak, senile, vulnerable. Sometimes I would sit in the garden and listen to them through the kitchen window. Those conversations that would have destroyed me before were now just confirmations, little stamps in a dossier I had been quietly compiling. In a hardcover notebook, I started writing. A diary? No, it was more of a behavior log. 2 columns. Who notices and who ignores. Kyle, double line under ignores. Daniel, observes but doesn't care. Paula, smiles in public, hurts in private. And I resisted. At night, lying in my bed, I listened to the footsteps, the conversations, the whispers. And instead of feeling afraid of what was to come, I felt increasingly free. as if the pain was already being recycled into power. The key, I discovered, was simple. They thought I was fragile, and that made them relax. The truth is that my strength lay in silence, in observation, in patience, in the ability to wait for the right moment. I never had to shout to be heard. But now, they were sure that I was just a burden. And that's when they started to show their true intentions. One morning, amid the noise of the kettle and the scraping of chairs in the dining room, I heard Paula say the words that sealed it for me. We should think about a more practical solution. A nursing home, maybe? A specialized place? She may need help? Help? Help is what I gave them my whole life. But that wasn't help. That was eviction disguised as care. I let them think that. I let them believe the narrative. The more confident they were, the more revealing they became. That night, before going to sleep, I wrote in my diary, "They're preparing me to leave. Little do they know that I'm already gone." It was a Saturday afternoon, and Paula decided to organize an informal dinner. Friends from yoga class, Daniel's coworkers, a lighthearted atmosphere according to her. She asked me to make my lemon cake, everyone's favorite, with that thick icing and grated zest on top. The recipe was my grandmother's, and even after all these years, I still knew it by heart. She didn't ask nicely. She asked as if she were scheduling a task. "Maybe it would be good for you to come. It will take your mind off things." Distraction. That was what I was now. A porcelain ornament for special occasions. I made the cake. Of course I did. Out of habit, perhaps. Because of an invisible bond that still tied me to the hope that something in me would be remembered with tenderness. But on that day, I didn't intend to smile. The house smelled of grilled meat and cheap rosé wine. Laughter escaped from the patio like smoke. I stood in the kitchen, next to the sink, like a discreet shadow. No one asked if I wanted to sit down. No one noticed that I hadn't even set a plate on the table. And then I heard it. Kyle's voice. Clear. Cold. Unmistakable. "Guys, you have to hear this," he said, holding a beer, standing in the center of the group. The laughter stopped, attentive. He continued. "At the last barbecue, my grandmother fell into the lake. I swear. It was like, plop, just like a turtle turned upside down." Laughter. People holding their glasses so they wouldn't spill their drinks. She was screaming, "Help me, help me," he mocked, his voice hoarse with derision. But seriously, I think she just wanted attention. Old people do that, right? They take advantage of their age. Someone whispered, "That's kind of harsh." And he replied, laughing, "Oh, relax, she's a tough old lady, she can take it." Tough old woman. That's how he described me. Not as the woman who fed him, who supported him, who took care of his asthma attacks in the middle of the night. Not as the grandmother who kept all his drawings in a cardboard box with a blue lid. As a joke. A nuisance. A caricature. And then came Paula's voice, soft as a sharp knife. "She's a burden. I already talked to Daniel. We need to think about the future. We can't live like this." There, standing behind the sliding door that led to the backyard, my hand was shaking. But not from weakness, from anger, from determination. I didn't cry. I didn't push the door. I didn't make a scene. I just turned my back, went to my room, and closed the door quietly. I sat on the edge of the bed, as I did on the nights when Kyle asked me to sing him to sleep. And something inside me, perhaps the little that still resisted, went out. It wasn't sadness. It was clarity. I pulled open the nightstand drawer, took out the envelope with Peter Holloway's card, and placed it on the bedspread. I picked up my cell phone, something I rarely did in that house, and dialed. He answered on the second ring. "Peter. It's Margaret." "Hi, Margaret. Is everything okay?" I hesitated for a second. Kyle's voice still echoed in my mind. The laughter. The words. "I'm ready." He didn't ask what for. There was no doubt. "Come tomorrow. Bring your documents. Bring everything. They're already separated." I hung up and sat there in the dark for a second, feeling the weight of the decision turn to lightness. I walked to the kitchen. The house was still echoing with laughter. On the counter, the lemon cake I had baked so carefully remained untouched. I picked up a knife. I cut a clean slice. I sat down alone at the table. And I ate. Slowly. Like a farewell ritual. Not for them. For me. They could continue their parties, their plans, their jokes. Let them laugh. Because soon, They would feel the silence I would leave behind. And for the first time, that silence would not be abandonment. It would be justice. The next day, a cloudy Sunday, I woke up before everyone else. The sky was covered with thick clouds, the kind of sky that heralds change. And that morning, indeed, it did. I didn't make coffee. I didn't open the windows. I just put on my thickest sweater, the navy blue one with gold buttons, tied my white hair in a tight bun, and folded the documents I had left on the bed with precision. Cliff would have understood. He always said that certain battles are not won by shouting, but by organizing. I grabbed my bag, put the papers away, and walked out the front door with light steps. No one saw me leave. At Peter Holloway's office, I was welcomed as if I were the most important woman in the world. He was discreet, direct, kind, the kind of lawyer who doesn't interrupt when a white-haired lady says firmly, "I want to transfer my grandson's college fund and then reorganize my entire estate." Carefully. He nodded and opened the folder. "Here's the original document," he said. $50,000 accumulated over the years. I touched the paper reverently. That fund wasn't just money. It was the symbol of all my sacrifices. Every vacation I never took. Every treat I never allowed myself. All saved for a future that I now knew didn't include me. "Is it still intact?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer. "Every penny," Peter confirmed. "You've never touched it." "Well then, I want to donate it to a scholarship fund for low-income youth, first in their family to go to college. That was Kyle's dream when he was 9 years old, before he forgot who he was." Peter paused, but didn't argue. "What about the house?" he asked, turning the page. "Not yet. That will come later. For now, keep everything in my name, but restrict access to anyone other than me." "Understood. And don't tell anyone. If they ask, say that everything must go through you now." He nodded again, without a word out of place. I left the office with the documents in order, and something more precious than any contract: conviction. I returned home in the late afternoon. The sun was already beginning to set. Daniel was sprawled on the couch, Paula was on a video call, and Kyle was in the backyard, laughing with someone on his cell phone. My arrival went unnoticed, and strangely, that brought me relief. I had dinner alone, a simple soup. Then I walked through the rooms as if taking inventory of a life. I ran my hand over the picture frames, the pillows I had sewn, the curtains I had embroidered. Everything remained untouched. And yet, I no longer belonged there. That night, I sat at the kitchen table and opened my notebook. On the first line of the new page, I wrote, "Let's see who loves me without needing an inheritance." And below, 2 columns. One for those who notice, another for those who ignore. Kyle? I still ignored him. Daniel? I was already planning my disappearance with a polite smile. Paula? She even despised the flowers I watered. Then I took an envelope and wrote on the back, "Everyone, open only after I'm gone." Inside, I left a simple letter. Not a farewell letter, but a statement, informing them that I was fine, that I had left by choice, and that, from that moment on, none of them would have access to a penny without going through Peter Holloway. I kept the envelope in the bottom drawer of the living room cabinet. I knew that when they found it, it would be too late to feign surprise. In the days that followed, I kept up the charade. More distractions, more delays, more fake tremors when serving tea. And the most ironic part? They barely concealed their contempt. They thought they were hiding it from me. Little did they know that they were the ones being evaluated. One morning, I caught Kyle and Paula whispering. Paula said, "When she goes, we need to act fast. Before the lawyer makes any changes." Kyle muttered something about his room becoming an office and how selling the house would pay for a new car. They had already buried me alive. Little did they know that when they came looking for me, I wouldn't be dead. I would be free. The decision was made on a quiet afternoon while I watered the hydrangeas in the garden, the same ones Cliff had planted with his calloused hands, saying that hardy flowers knew when it was time to bloom again. And I knew. The time had come. With Dolores by my side, everything was easier. She showed up in her bright yellow blazer, the same huge sunglasses, and a folder organized as if she were my manager and not my best friend. "Are you ready, Margaret?" "Not just ready," I replied. "I'm relieved." We scheduled the trip for a Friday morning. Dolores knew the perfect place: Silver Pines, a quiet community for active retirees, 2 towns north of us. Manicured lawns, respectful neighbors, libraries, and sewing and gardening workshops. It was like a parallel world where respect wasn't a bonus. It was the bare minimum. The day before we left, I prepared everything with the precision of someone who had said goodbye 1,000 times. I packed just one suitcase, 3 sweaters, 2 dresses, my pair of leather shoes, my documents, my notebook, and a single photograph. Kyle, at age 3, his face smeared with jelly, sitting on my lap, looking at me as if I were the world. I kept the photo not out of longing, but as a symbol, to remind me that there was love once, and that it didn't save me. The rest, I left everything. Dishes, paintings, furniture, Christmas presents that were never opened. The house was theirs. They could have it. But without me. That night, I announced my trip in a casual tone as I folded a dish towel. Dolores is taking me on a weekend trip. We're going to visit a new place. I need some fresh air. Daniel didn't take his eyes off his cell phone. Cool. Enjoy. Kyle walked past me with his headphones on, muttering a dry "oh" as he opened the refrigerator. Paula, organizing clothes in the laundry room, just said, "Drive carefully." No one asked where I was going, or when I would be back. No one. I left my suitcase by the door. They saw it, and ignored it, or pretended to ignore it. Maybe deep down they knew, but they were so sure of their own narrative, that of a frail, disoriented grandmother stuck in a routine, that they didn't even consider that I still had a choice. The next morning, the alarm went off at 5:30 a.m. I got up quietly. I put on the sweater Cliff liked best. I calmly tied my white hair back, and before I left, I took one last look at the house, the living room, the paintings, the wall where Kyle's height marks were still scribbled. The silence answered me with more dignity than any voice in that house. I closed the door slowly. Dolores was waiting for me with the engine running. She looked at me, assessed my expression, and asked, "Did they ask where you were going?" I shook my head. "They didn't even bother to pretend," she sighed, somewhere between ironic and sad. "Imagine that. A woman disappears and no one notices. It's not abandonment. It's liberation." The road seemed clearer than ever. With every mile we drove away, the weight on my back grew lighter. I didn't cry. Not a single tear. Because the pain had already done what it needed to do. Wake me up. At the station, Dolores hugged me and handed me a brown envelope. "Just in case," she said, with that half smile that held both tenderness and gunpowder. "You've always been more family to me than they were," I replied. She didn't answer. She just squeezed my hand as if sealing a pact. I got on the train with my light suitcase and a free heart. I sat by the window. As the city receded, I realized that what I was leaving behind was not a home. It was a prison decorated with memories. I took a deep breath. For the first time in decades, I truly breathed. Silver Pines appeared after a few hours of travel. Small houses with large windows, white fences, flower boxes, a place where no one knew me, where I wasn't the grandmother or the mother-in-law or the burden, where I could just be Margaret. My new room was small but cozy. A bed by the window, a rocking chair, a bookcase waiting for my books, and next to it, a hook where I hung Cliff's flannel. I placed a photo of Kyle as a child on the windowsill, not as a memento, but as a witness, so that he would somehow know. I loved him, and I left. That afternoon, I sat in the garden with a cup of hot tea. The sun touched my white hair gently. An old lady was knitting a blanket near me. An old man was reading the newspaper in silence. No one rushed me. No one ignored me. And it was there, in that simplicity, that I discovered I hadn't left. I had finally arrived. 5 days since I got on that train. 5 days since I left the house where I raised generations, baked cakes, wiped away tears, and patched cracks. In the ceiling and in my heart. 5 days since I chose silence, not as punishment, but as protection. And then, as expected, the panic began. The first news came by email. Peter Holloway forwarded it to me with the subject line, "Urgent, please call us, Mom." It was from Daniel. 3 paragraphs of poorly punctuated desperation. He said they weren't mad, that they just wanted to talk, that Kyle was really shaken up. "You disappeared all of a sudden," he wrote. "We're really worried." Worried? I almost drowned. No one cared. I ate cake alone while they mocked my pain. No one cared. Now, my absence bothered them. Because absence is the only silence that self-serving people can't stand. Peter asked if he should respond. No, I wrote. Let them feel the emptiness. 2 days later, another email. A little less polite. We need to know what's going on. You can't just disappear like this. What will happen to Kyle's fund? There it was. The nerve. The real reason. They tried to access the banks. They were denied. They tried to contact the foundation where I had donated the college fund. Also denied. And then, the boldest move, they reported me missing. An officer showed up at Peter's office. Polite, but curious. We have a report of a possible missing person, a woman named Margaret Walker. Peter, calm as ever, handed over all the documents. Proof of change of address, legalized donation records, my signed Declaration of Independence. She is alive. She is well. And she is finally free. The officer smiled. He said it was rare to see someone do this so precisely. A few days later, Peter sent me another email. Subject: They are lost. I didn't open it right away. I was in the garden, watering the rose bushes with my new neighbor, Janice, a widowed lady with an easy laugh and a sharp sense of humor. When I returned, I read, Daniel tried again. Paula called the foundation. Kyle sent a message saying there was a misunderstanding. They are begging for explanations, and please forgive the boldness. But it's almost poetic to watch. It wasn't revenge. It was consequence. The next morning, Dolores called me laughing. Girl, you're a legend. Paula freaked out in front of the market. She said you were ungrateful, that you destroyed the family. One of her yoga students replied, Funny, she seems more lucid than you guys. I laughed so hard I almost spilled my tea, because the masks were finally starting to come off. Without my constant presence to be used as a shield, as an excuse, as an emotional servant, they were exposed. Kyle failed the semester. He tried to get a refund from the college, but the system had already recorded the closure of the fund. The foundation, generous and transparent, sent a formal letter. The donation was made in the name of Clifford James Walker, intended for first-generation students. Its value is already benefiting young people committed to their studies and their community. Paula, according to Dolores, lost several followers from the circle of influential mothers. One of them said loudly as she left church, If she laughed at her mother-in-law drowning, imagine what she does to those who have no inheritance involved. Daniel kept quiet. He started drinking again, according to a neighbor who commented to Dolores, the kind of silence that comes not from longing, but from the weight of unresolved guilt. And me? I sat on my new terrace. I wrapped a blanket around my legs. I watched the birds arguing on the edge of the fence. I planted onions in the window box. I made friends without having to explain who I was. They didn't have to like me. They just respected me. And that was enough. I didn't feel alone. I was surrounded by ladies and gentlemen who didn't pretend to listen, who didn't mock my slowness or my quirks, who looked me in the eye when they said, "Good morning." It was strange at first, to be seen, to be treated like an adult, like a whole woman, like Margaret and not just Grandma. And then, one cold morning, Peter called me. He said they had asked for a meeting, and that I had authorized him to receive them from the beginning. "It's going to be today," he said. "Do you want me to read everything?" "Every word," I replied. "And if they try to find me after that, you know what to do." "Of course. You're protected, Margaret. They only have the right to reflect, and to learn. Alone." I hung up. I stood there for a while, just listening to the wind, feeling the peace they never let me have. They still thought I was the fragile grandmother. Little did they know that that woman had already buried her fear. And what was left was freedom. Peter sent me the full report of the meeting that same night, a PDF file with an exact transcript of the conversation. He said he made sure to record the audio and write everything down. For your sake. And if I may say so, for my own satisfaction as well. I opened the document slowly, with a steady hand, like someone unrolling a veil after a funeral. But it wasn't mourning. It was a birth. Mine. At the top, in bold letters, official statement by Margaret Elizabeth Walker regarding the redistribution of her assets and rights. Peter greeted them with the seriousness the occasion demanded. Daniel entered tense, like a man who knows the ground beneath his feet is already cracking. Paula wore her best beige blazer, the one she wore for her victim statement. Kyle? Downcast, but not out of regret. Out of fear. Peter didn't greet them like old friends. He just said, "I am here as the legal representative of Margaret Walker. She is alive, well, and for the first time at peace. She has asked me to read her words in their entirety." And then he read, "To all who mistook my presence for obligation, who took my silence as permission and my love as an infinite resource, this is my goodbye. I was the woman who lifted you up when you fell, who supported you when no one else did. I was a mother, a grandmother, a caregiver, a cook, an advisor, and a financier. But I was never respected as a person. You laughed when I nearly died. You whispered plans to erase me while I still lived among you. You tried to measure my lucidity for your own convenience. Well, know this. The university I saved up for over a decade now belongs to young people who never saw me, but who will still honor what I gave. The house where I grew up, raised my children, rebuilt, will be donated. I will leave no keys. I will leave dignity. You will receive nothing of mine after my death, because you killed me emotionally while I was still breathing. Love without respect is not inheritance. It is exploitation. And I have ended that cycle." Daniel, according to Peter, tried to interrupt. He claimed confusion. He said it had all been misunderstood. Peter stopped him with the coldness of someone who knows that a man only shouts when he realizes he has lost the power of silence. She wrote this calmly, consciously, with full legal autonomy. Kyle mumbled something about forgiveness. Paula blurted out, "That's cruel," like someone seeing themselves in the mirror for the first time without makeup. But the last line of the document cut like a polished knife. "You confused my fragility with weakness. And you forgot that I still had something that no one can steal, the power to decide how my story ends." Signed, Margaret Elizabeth Walker, a woman, not a burden. Peter said that after that, no one said another word. Daniel rubbed his face. Paula turned pale. Kyle stared at the floor like a boy who finally understood he wasn't invincible. They left without saying goodbye. And on the other side of the file, closed my laptop with the lightness of someone closing a cycle. The next morning, I made my tea. I walked to the community garden. The sun filtered through the leaves. Janice greeted me with a smile. The man who played chess every afternoon offered me a chair. I sat down. I took a deep breath. I looked at the wrinkled hands that had given so much, and now knew it was time to retire. That day was not special. There was no event. There was no cake. And yet, it was the day I felt most alive in 69 years. Weightless. No ghosts. No silent contracts that tied me to those who only knew how to suck me dry. And it was there, among flowers and simple people, that I understood the difference between loneliness and freedom. Loneliness is when you are surrounded by people who don't see you. Freedom is when you choose yourself, even if no one else does. And I chose myself, for the first time, for the last time, forever.